March 27th, 1980. A single trading day that Wall Street still refuses to talk about openly. In one afternoon, silver lost half its value. Not over a month. Not over a week. In hours. Fortunes vanished before lunch was even finished. Banks quietly prepared emergency bailouts behind closed doors, and two of the wealthiest men in the world watched their empire collapse in real time, live on a trading floor that had never seen anything like it before, and hasn't since. But here's what almost nobody tells you. The crash wasn't the real story. The real story is what happened in the 18 months before it, because if you understand that sequence, you'll recognize it happening again right now in 2026. Let's go back. In the early 1970s, silver was cheap, ignored, ordinary. Trading around $5 or $6 an ounce, it was the metal nobody wanted. Then two Texas brothers, heirs to one of the largest oil fortunes in the world, made a decision that would rewrite commodity market history. They didn't just buy silver, they accumulated it. Physical bars, coins, futures contracts, quietly, relentlessly for years. By the end of the decade, estimates suggest they controlled close to 1/3 of all privately held silver on the planet. Think about that for a second. 1/3, not of one company's supply, of the entire world's available silver. And here's where it gets interesting, because what happened next wasn't really about greed. It was about a feedback loop almost nobody sees coming until they're inside it. As physical silver disappeared off the market into private vaults, the metal available for trading shrank. Scarcity pushed futures prices higher. Higher futures prices made the physical holdings look even more valuable, which pushed more buying, which caused more scarcity. It fed itself. By January 1980, silver hit nearly $50 an ounce, a number that, adjusted for today's dollars, is almost unthinkable for how fast it happened. 18 months earlier, it had been under $6. Does any of this sound familiar yet? Now, here's the twist most people miss completely. It wasn't a natural market top that ended this. It wasn't investors simply deciding silver was too expensive. The exchange itself stepped in. New margin rules were introduced almost overnight, rules that made it dramatically harder to keep buying with borrowed money. The moment leverage was restricted, the entire structure that had been holding the price up for a year and a half began to crack. And once it cracked, it didn't slow down, it didn't correct, it collapsed. That collapse is coming up in the next part. The actual mechanics of Silver Thursday, minute by minute, and why the same warning signs that existed in early 1980 are lighting up again in the silver market of 2026. Because history doesn't just rhyme here. In some ways, it's following the same script almost word for word. Stay with me, because part 2 is where this gets genuinely uncomfortable. Now let's slow down, because this is the part almost nobody explains properly. By late 1979, silver wasn't just expensive anymore. It was breaking things. Doctors couldn't get affordable X-ray film because silver is a key component in the coating. Jewelers were melting down inventory just to reprice it fast enough. Ordinary families were pulling silver flatware out of drawers and selling it for scrap because grandmother's old cutlery was suddenly worth more as bullion than as heirlooms. One of the world's most famous jewelry houses even took out a full-page newspaper ad publicly condemning the hoarding, calling it, in their words, unconscionable. That's how distorted things had become. An entire industrial supply chain was being strangled by two men's private vaults, and this is exactly where the exchange stepped in. Not the market, not investors, the exchange itself. On January 7th, 1980, new margin rules were introduced almost overnight. In plain terms, anyone who wanted to keep buying silver on borrowed money suddenly couldn't. Existing positions were frozen in place. New long buying was essentially shut off. Meanwhile, short sellers, the ones betting against silver, had faced no such restriction. Read that again. The rules were changed specifically to stop one side of the trade, while leaving the other side free to operate. At the same time, behind closed doors, the head of the Federal Reserve was quietly signaling to major banks, stop lending for precious metals speculation. No public announcement, no debate, just pressure applied privately at exactly the moment it would matter most. The trap had been set. Now it just needed time to close. For a few weeks, the Hunt brothers held on through sheer financial force. But every margin call now came due in a market where they couldn't defend their own position. They couldn't buy more. They couldn't roll their contracts forward the way they always had. Their only real options were to pay staggering sums in cash they didn't have liquid or watch it unwind. Then came March 27th. That morning, silver opened already deeply wounded, down to roughly $15, a shadow of the $50 peak from just weeks earlier. A margin call arrived, $100 million, due almost immediately to a single brokerage firm. The Hunts couldn't pay it. Within hours, the floor gave way completely. Silver cratered past $20, then past $15, finally bottoming near $10.80, a collapse of roughly 50% in a single trading session. Total margin calls against the family reportedly exceeded $1.5 billion. Their broker faced its own bankruptcy risk. Multiple banks, fearing contagion, scrambled overnight to arrange emergency credit, not to help the Hunts personally, but to stop the entire financial system from catching fire alongside them. That single day earned its name in market history, Silver Thursday. Here's the uncomfortable part. The Hunt brothers didn't lose because silver was a bad asset. They lost because leverage, concentration, and a sudden change in the rules of the game collided all at once, and there was no way out of the box they'd built for themselves. Now here's why this matters in 2026, not 1980. Because three of those same ingredients, extreme leverage in the futures market, a supply squeeze on physical metal, and regulatory attention creeping back towards silver, are visible again, right now, in the exact same order. We'll get into that next. Here's where it stops being history and starts being current events. Because right now, in 2026, three of the exact same warning signs that existed in early 1980 are flashing again. Not in theory, not as a loose comparison, but in the actual data. Start with leverage. In 1980, the ratio of paper contracts to real deliverable silver became so extreme that the exchange itself panicked and rewrote the rules mid-game. In late 2025 and into early 2026, that same ratio resurfaced. At one point, estimates placed paper silver trading at over 300 ounces for every 1 ounce actually sitting in a registered vault. Not slightly stretched, not mildly leveraged, structurally fragile, the same way it was decades ago. Then came the physical side. COMEX registered inventories, the silver actually available for delivery, not just sitting in storage, fell roughly 30% in a matter of months in early 2026. On one single delivery day in March, more than 50 million ounces were demanded for physical settlement in one session alone. To put that in perspective, a typical month sees 10 to 20 million ounces move. This wasn't typical. It was a coverage ratio collapsing toward levels that, historically, precede exactly the kind of violent unwind we saw in 1980. And silver did explode. It surged past $100 an ounce, eventually touching an all-time nominal high above $120 in January 2026, a number that, even accounting for decades of inflation, rewrote the record books. Then, just like 1980, it didn't hold. It corrected violently, falling roughly 50% from that peak within months. Sound familiar yet? Here's the part almost no analyst wants to say plainly. The squeeze itself, the paper-to-physical panic, has largely unwound. Vault stocks have rebuilt, leverage ratios have normalized. If you're only watching the squeeze, the story looks over. But the squeeze was never the real foundation. Underneath it sits something the Hunt brothers era never actually had to face. A genuine, structural, year-after-year supply deficit. Not a temporary shortage caused by one buyer cornering the market. A permanent gap where the world simply uses more silver every single year than mines and recycling can replace it. This is now the 6th consecutive year that deficit has shown up, with tens of millions of ounces of shortfall projected again for this year alone. In 1980, once the squeeze broke, the story was basically finished. Silver had nowhere real to go but down for years. This time, the squeeze breaking doesn't end the story. It just removes the loudest, most obvious argument, while the quieter one keeps compounding underneath, year after year, deficit after deficit. Industrial demand from solar, electronics, and next-generation manufacturing quietly eating into stockpiles that aren't infinite. That's the uncomfortable twist regulators and old-school traders don't want to admit. 1980 was a leverage problem that resolved itself violently once and then went quiet for decades. 2026 has that same leverage problem, but it's sitting on top of a supply problem that 1980 never had. So which pattern wins? The fast, violent one from history or the slow, grinding one building right now? That's exactly what we need to unpack next, because the answer changes everything about how this plays out from here. So let's answer the question we left hanging. Which pattern actually wins? The fast, violent unwind from 1980 or the slow, grinding deficit building right now? The honest answer is that both are already playing out simultaneously, and most people are only watching one of them. The fast pattern already happened this year. Silver rocketed to an all-time nominal high above $120 an ounce in January, then corrected violently, losing roughly half its value within months, trading down into the $50 range by mid-year. If you only look at that chart, it looks exactly like Silver Thursday playing out in slow motion. A spike, a rules-driven squeeze unwind, a brutal fall. That's the loud story. That's the one that gets headlines. But underneath that noise sits the quiet pattern, the one 1980 never actually had to deal with. This is now the 6th consecutive year the world has consumed more silver than mines and recycling combined can produce. Not a one-time supply shock caused by a couple of buyers cornering a market. A structural repeating shortfall driven by solar panels, electronics, and next-generation manufacturing demand that doesn't disappear just because the price corrects. And here's the part that should genuinely make you pause. Despite the 50% correction, not one major institutional forecaster has lowered their full-year target below where silver is currently trading. Consensus estimates from major banks and industry research groups still cluster in the high 70s to mid 80s range for year-end, with some more bullish scenarios extending meaningfully higher if the ratio between gold and silver, currently sitting near historically stretched levels, begins compressing the way it has in past cycles. That ratio matters more than most casual investors realize. Right now, it takes somewhere close to 70 ounces of silver to equal the value of 1 ounce of gold, a level that, historically, has marked silver as deeply undervalued relative to gold rather than overextended. Every time this ratio has sat near these extremes in past decades, the eventual correction favored silver, not gold. So here's the real lesson buried in this entire story. From 1873 to 1980 to right now in 2026. Silver has never crashed because the metal itself was worthless. It's crashed because leverage, concentration, and rule changes collided all at once, shaking out the paper market while leaving the underlying physical reality untouched. The Hunt brothers didn't lose because silver was a bad bet. They lost because they built a fragile structure on top of a real trend. The question we're sitting with isn't whether silver crashed. It's whether the structural deficit driving demand higher every single year has actually gone anywhere. Based on everything we've just walked through, it hasn't. It's still compounding, quietly, underneath all the noise. History doesn't repeat perfectly, but it's clearly rhyming here, closely enough that anyone paying attention should be watching, not panicking. That's the full picture. Not hype, not fear, just the pattern, laid out honestly. Invest with logic, not hype. OG out.